July 4, 1994, should have belonged to the United States. A World Cup knockout match at home. Independence Day. More than 80,000 people at Stanford Stadium. And across the field, Brazil. For America, this was a chance to prove that soccer could belong. For Brazil, the afternoon carried a colder weight. The Seleção had not come to complete an American story. It had come carrying 24 years without a World Cup, and one more dangerous match on the road to the fourth star. The stage looked American. The burden was Brazilian. For the United States, this was proof that the tournament had taken root, at least for a summer. American soccer had lived for years at a distance from the sports center. Now there were flags, television cameras, a packed stadium in California, and a national team still alive in the knockout round. The day made the occasion larger than the match. Brazil did not arrive with that innocence. The Seleção had come through the group stage with control, though not with the lightness many people still attached to the yellow shirt. This was a team of Romário and Bebeto, with Dunga and Mauro Silva behind them. It had talent, and it had guardrails. It could attack, but it could also close a match down. It was Brazil, though not the Brazil people imagined when they wanted the game to feel effortless. The group stage had already shown that this Brazil was not chasing approval in the usual way. It beat Russia and Cameroon, then drew with Sweden after already doing enough to move on. Romário had scored, Bebeto had scored, and the side had shown its basic personality. Direct when it had space, cautious when the match asked for caution, and rarely tempted into playing only for the crowd. That made the American match a useful test. If Brazil won easily, the day would disappear into the larger route to the title. If Brazil lost control, the whole tournament could become another national wound. The line between routine and disaster was thin, because the opponent did not need to be historically great. It only needed to catch Brazil on the wrong afternoon. Against the United States, Brazil was expected to win. Expectation did not make the match simple. The Americans did not need to become Brazil's equal in technique to make the afternoon uncomfortable. They needed the crowd, the heat, their own organization, and enough time without conceding for the game to tighten. The first half moved inside that tension. Brazil had the better players and the older habits. The United States had the home occasion and the physical energy of a team trying to stretch its moment. Tony Meola stood in goal. Alexi Lalas and Marcelo Balboa gave the back line recognizable faces. Tab Ramos gave the midfield its most refined touch. Kobe Jones and Ernie Stewart gave the team running and release. In a country still learning how to remember its footballers, those names mattered because they gave the tournament faces. They made the American team feel less like a host obligation and closer to a group the crowd could recognize. Brazil tried to impose its rhythm. Jorginho pushed from the right. Leonardo from left back gave Brazil another technical outlet. Dunga and Mauro Silva protected the middle. Romário and Bebeto waited for the kind of opening that can decide a match without warning. Still, the score stayed level. When the favorite does not score early, the match begins to change. The underdog grows into the day. The crowd begins to feel the possibility. The stronger team feels the first signs of irritation. For Brazil, this was dangerous because it turns superiority into patience, and patience into a test of nerve. Then, just before halftime, Brazil lost control. Leonardo and Tab Ramos came together near the touchline. The ball was moving away. Leonardo swung his elbow and struck Ramos in the head. Ramos went down. The American players reacted. The referee showed the red card. In one moment, Brazil had damaged the match and damaged itself. Ramos had to leave injured. Leonardo walked off. What had been an awkward but manageable knockout tie became something harsher. Brazil with 10 men against the host nation inside a stadium that suddenly had a clearer reason to believe. The incident left a mark because it cut across the usual image of Brazil. There was no dribble, no pass, and no moment of invention. Just a loss of discipline, in a match where discipline was supposed to protect Brazil from exactly this kind of danger. The second half began with a different question. Could the United States turn the man advantage into a real threat, or could Brazil reduce the game again? That is where the 1994 team began to show its true shape. Not the mythology around the shirt, but the actual team. Dunga organizing the center, Mauro Silva reading second balls, Aldair and Marcio Santos holding the line, Tafarel staying calm behind them, Romario and Bebeto accepting that they might only get one clean chance. Brazil did not become beautiful after the red card. It became careful. Possession had to be used with restraint. Runs had to be chosen. The fullbacks could not treat the game as freely as before. Every Brazilian move carried a small calculation. How much risk could the team afford while playing a man down? The United States had the extra player, but not the old football authority that usually comes with it. The red card opened space in theory. It did not give the Americans Brazil's timing, Brazil's patience, or Brazil's ability to make the match smaller. They had energy. They had the crowd. They had the emotion of Ramos's injury. They still had to turn all of that into a goal against a side built to survive pressure. Brazil kept waiting. That waiting matters in the memory of 1994. The team is often reduced to a debate between beauty and pragmatism, as if it chose one and abandoned the other. Matches like this show something more specific. Brazil had players who could still decide games with quality. What changed was the way that quality was protected. The team did not ask Romario and Bebeto to carry chaos. It asked them to finish controlled moments. The moment came in the 72nd minute. Romario drove at the American defense and released the ball to Bebeto. Bebeto's run was clean, his touch measured, his finish low past Meola. Brazil led 1-0. It was not a goal that turned the afternoon into celebration. It was a goal that restored order. That is the difference. Bebeto did not erase the red card. He did not make the performance look grand. He gave Brazil the thing the match required: a lead, a way out, and a result that turned the pressure back into something the team could manage. The final stretch still had tension. The United States kept pushing, and late in the match, Fernando Clavijo was sent off after a second yellow card, leaving both teams with 10 men. By then, the emotional shape had already changed. The American chance had narrowed. Brazil's job had become clearer: hold the line, protect the score, and move into the quarterfinals. The final minutes did not feel like a procession. They carried the strain of a team close enough to danger that every clearance, every foul, and every pause felt like part of the escape. When the whistle came, the two teams did not leave with the same meaning. The United States had lost, but it had not disappeared. For American soccer, that mattered. The host nation had reached a knockout match, stood close enough to Brazil for the game to remain alive, and made the afternoon part of its own football memory. Even the disappointment carried evidence. The sport had produced a national occasion in a country that was still learning how to hold one. Brazil left with something else. Not romance or applause for a great performance, but survival. That kind of victory is easy to underrate after the trophy has been lifted. The final image of 1994 is Dunga holding the World Cup at the Rose Bowl, Brazil's fourth title secured after penalties against Italy. Once that image exists, the earlier discomforts can look like steps that were always leading there. They did not feel inevitable at the time. At Stanford, Brazil had been vulnerable. One uncontrolled elbow had changed the match. One host crowd had gained belief. One underdog had enough of the day behind it to make Brazil feel the cost of every decision. The team that eventually became champion had to pass through that without looking like the Brazil of old dreams. This is why the July 4th frame is useful and also incomplete. The date makes the match easy to remember as an American scene. Independence Day, the home team, A World Cup trying to prove soccer could belong in the United States. The football kept pulling the story back toward Brazil's older burden. There was also the simple fact of the shirt. Brazil could never appear as just another visiting team. In a World Cup still trying to make itself legible to millions of casual American viewers, Brazil carried an immediate meaning. Even people who knew little about tactics or squads knew the yellow shirt belonged to the sport's old imagination. That visibility helped the tournament, but it also tightened the space around the team. Brazil was both visitor and standard. The team was playing inside America's football experiment, while giving that experiment some of its weight. A World Cup in the United States felt more connected to the game's history when Brazil was still alive in it. The yellow shirt attached the tournament to an older world. For Brazil, that brought its own cost. Every match carried judgment. After 1970, the country had waited. 1982 had become a beautiful wound. 1986 had ended in another near miss. 1990 had left frustration and mistrust. By 1994, the Seleção needed to do more than win games. It needed to stop the past from repeating itself. The United States match belongs to that pressure. It was one of the afternoons where Brazil could not rely on reputation. It had to become practical. It had to accept that the path to the fourth star would include moments that did not look like the country's preferred image of itself. That does not make the victory small. It makes it more revealing. Teams are often easier to understand when the match refuses to flatter them. Against the United States, Brazil had very little softness. It had a symbolic date it did not control, a crowd that wanted another story, an injury that changed the mood, a red card that exposed the team, and one goal that felt less like expression than extraction. Bebeto scored. Brazil advanced. The tournament continued. The simple version is true, but it misses the weight of the afternoon. On July 4th, Brazil did not give America the football story the stage seemed ready to receive, nor did it give Brazilian romantics much beauty. It gave itself the result it needed. And in that World Cup, that was the point. Brazil's 1994 title was not built only from its brightest moments. It was built from matches where the team accepted discomfort and kept moving. Stanford Stadium was one of those passages. A host nation found proof that it could stand closer to the game's center. Brazil found proof of something colder, that it could survive a bad afternoon without losing the tournament. For 90 minutes, two histories shared the same field. The United States had the date, the crowd, and the possibility of arrival. Brazil had the obligation. When the whistle ended it, America had a memory it could keep. Brazil had one more dangerous step behind it. Not every champion announces itself with beauty. Some champions reveal themselves by how they leave uncomfortable matches intact. On July 4th, 1994, Brazil did not look free. It looked burdened, controlled, and difficult to remove. That was enough to keep the World Cup alive.